What's up? I'm back with another quick short update video. So I didn't get the chance to work on much today. I was traveling out of town and I only got back really around 7 p.m. So I didn't get the chance to do much work, but I think I have a good idea of what I need to do to close out this project. And so I'm going to go over that briefly, and then I'm going to talk about some plans I have for some future stuff on this channel that I'm thinking about doing. So first off, for the HTTP server project, so what I have in place so far is I've set up a TCP server which I can connect to from devices on my local area network. I have figured out that if I use curl, for example, from git bash or from some shell and send curl requests to that TCP server, I can receive the raw bytes encoding that HTTP request. So what that means is that I've validated that the input coming to my TCP server is correct, and all I have to do is write the correct parsing logic and return the correct response. So I believe there's 9 fixed HTTP request methods, and I can initiate all of those with curl and get the correct the correct format in bytes. So I can write code to handle each of those 9 instances, and basically there's a couple things I need to consider about the structure of these HTTP requests. So the first of which is that they all have 2 to 3 components. They are guaranteed to have 2 components. The first component is the request line that says like get, put, delete, whatever. The HTTP protocol versions like 1.0 versus 1.1, and then the endpoint that request is being made to. Additionally, they have headers, which is sort of like metadata about the request. So it might be the URL where the request is being made to. It might be the client that's making the request, so whether it's a browser or whether it's curl, things like that. And then additionally, certain methods like put have a third component, which is the body where data is included. But other methods like get do not have this body, it's just empty. So generally the task before me is I need to split HTTP requests as they come in into those 2 or 3 components depending on how many it has, and then deal with that individually. So step 1 is identifying what type of request is being made. I've really already written code for most of this. Identify which request is being made. Step 2 is parse through the metadata and see if there's anything important about that request that we need to consider when we're formulating the response. And then step 3 is parse through the data in the body if the body is present, because if there is a body, that means that there's probably something we need to do on the server side with the data being sent before we're able to formulate and send back our response. So as far as the data that can be sent though, generally I believe it could go in any number of forms. To restrict the scope of this project so that it's not too broad and I don't spend all of my time handling edge cases, I think for now I'm going to focus on raw bytes. It's like raw bytes format of a PNG, base64 format, so encoding and decoding base64 stuff, which I already have a project on, and JSON. So I think if I can cover base64, JSON, and then just raw byte streams, that should cover a great deal of the type of data that you would normally send over HTTP requests. Maybe I'm missing something large and obvious, but I will look through and see, but I imagine those are really the 3 main ways that data is going to be represented as it's sent through. So generally the work that remains to be done is I need to have code to handle the various data formats which I expect to receive from these HTTP requests. And then for each of the 9 HTTP requests, I need to have custom code to respond to that request appropriately, given what it's asking for, any data that might be included in the body, and then any information within the metadata headers that might distinguish how we treat one request from another. Once I get that down, I think I will pretty much be happy with what I've done in this project, and I can set it down for a little bit. That's not to say that I'll never want to improve it or optimize it or add new things onto it, but generally my goal with this project at the very beginning was I want to create a server just from a Python script that can handle HTTP requests coming in and then respond to them appropriately without using any sort of high-level libraries that already implement this stuff for me. So I want to do most of the implementation on the logic side from scratch, and obviously I had choices about how far in complexity I wanted to go. Like, I guess I could have gone all the way down to the operating system level and write a wrapper around these operating system, I guess you'd call them functions or utilities, that set up the port and listen and do all those things. I chose not to do that. I restricted my level of complexity to beginning by using the Python socket library. Obviously, I think it'd be a good learning experience if I went deeper than that and tried to recreate the behavior that the Python socket library is offering. That would give me a greater level of depth in understanding what's going on right now. But I think using that as a given and using that utility out of the box is sufficient for what I'm trying to accomplish as far as creating the HTTP server. So unfortunately, didn't get to make a whole lot of progress coding, but I think I have pretty well described what is left to be done in this project, and so all that remains to be done at this point is to execute it and get that finished. So I feel like I'm in a good spot with that. And what I wanted to talk about for the rest of this video was some additional things that I want to work on. So I've been thinking about making some videos pertaining more to my area of expertise. So I know a lot of my videos have been on self-studying computer science, but my area of expertise is math and machine learning. And so I think in addition to me documenting my self-teaching journey, I think it would be helpful to make some videos about stuff that I actually am very knowledgeable about, so that people can come to this channel and they can follow along my journey as I'm developing my skills in the field of computer science, which is adjacent to my field and which I'm trying to learn more about, but also have the opportunity to learn something from me where I teach information about a topic that I actually do know a lot about and I have some authority on and some credentials on. So obviously I can make videos on any number of math or ML topics, but I think generally I might just start with some simple stuff. So maybe start with some fundamentals of neural networks, fundamentals of just the AI field in general. And I think that would be, that might be something people are interested in. What I've found is that with videos that talk about AI, they run into a couple of issues. The first of which is, usually the issue is that they do not go sufficiently deep when talking about the mathematical background. And because they do that, oftentimes people get this idea that AI is some sort of magical or like whimsical thing that we don't understand. Like, for example, I saw a clip of Jeffrey Hinton where he said, we don't know why the AI does what it does. And if you're someone who knows about training these neural networks, you understand what he's saying. But if you're a layman and you don't understand that these neural networks are universal function approximators, and you hear some guy that they refer to as the godfather of AI remark that we don't know how the models work, what you're going to think is not, he's talking about the limitations of interpreting the models. You're going to think, this model is off agentically doing stuff on its own. It's broken out of containment. We don't know what it's doing anymore, and we have no way of analyzing it. That's not the case, obviously, but I think that's one of the things that people will conclude when they're not educated on the field, and the people that are the communicators for the field aren't good at choosing their words carefully to ensure that people aren't led astray in ways like that. All of that is to say, though, is that I think there's just an insufficient level of focus on math. People don't go deep enough on math when talking about machine learning. They like to hand wave a lot about how things work, but they refuse to tackle the math that explains it. So you can say, the neural network is approximating the function, but how many people can tell you how that approximation is happening? How many people can tell you how tuning the parameters influences the degree to which, or not the degree to which, how tuning the parameters influences how accurate that approximation is? How many people can tell you what the difference is between making the neural network deeper or including more neurons in the constituent hidden layers. A lot of that stuff gets glossed over, and I think it's fine if you just want a high-level understanding, but a lot of these YouTube channels and learning resources, which are ostensibly meant to teach people about the fundamentals of AI, leave too much of the math out of the picture, to the point that I think a lot of people walk away with an impression that these models are more mystical or magical or non-deterministic than they actually are. And so that's something that I think I could offer a good perspective on. Is, I'm coming from the optimization, formalization, mathematical background, and it's really not that complicated, but you need to do people the service of actually discussing it in depth, because the further you push the math down the line, the harder it is to understand everything that's downstream. And I think it's to people's deficit when they do that. And so I think by making a couple of videos where I really go deep on the math, that's something that there isn't a lot of out there on YouTube. I think because people are concerned about how communicable it is to a broader audience, but I don't think it's that hard if you're talking to people that have an engineering background and they know their basic vector calculus and linear algebra. But regardless, that remains to be seen. But I think it's a worthwhile thing to try, and so I might try to make some of those videos in this upcoming week. That is it for my update video today, though. So didn't get to do much coding, but I know what needs to be done to finish off this HTTP project, and I'm gonna be happy to probably knock that out in the next day or two, or maybe 3, depending on how things go. So yeah, that's all there is for this update. By the way, I just spent a little bit of time talking about how I want to make some more math and machine learning oriented videos in addition to the CS self-study recaps. If you guys have any suggestions about what you want me to tackle, please leave it in the comments, and I will go ahead and make that video, because there's any number of videos I could do to start, and choosing one doesn't really matter to me. So if any of you guys that watch these videos have a preference, I'd be happy to talk about what it is that you want to have discussed. But yeah, that's the end of it for this video. Have a good one.